Hello everybody and welcome to the My Generation podcast. I'm here today with Daniel Inwood from Canterbury and we are going to be talking about social detoxing on today's show. So recently I went to Brighton for a social media detox to give me new surroundings, experiment with life away from my smartphone and think about what I want to do with my work. And I loved the experience. So today I wanted to ask Dan what he has to say about social detoxing. So, hello Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, nice to see you, and thank you to Canterbury Christchurch for letting us use their facilities to record this.
Absolutely, we are here in the Powell building, so yeah, a big shout out to Canterbury Christchurch University for allowing us to make use of their wonderful new modern facilities.
Yeah. So, regarding social media, Dan, where do you sit? And is there anything to do with your work or anything that involves social media?
I'm a fairly heavy viewer of social media. I wouldn't say that I'm a great big interactor with a lot of the social media platforms out there. I'm predominantly most present on Facebook and Instagram.
And why specifically Facebook and Instagram, do you think?
Instagram in particular has a very, very easy format for me because I like to look at the stories that people put up and I like to look at these little snapshots of what's going on. And I find that all of the extra bits on Facebook, all of the connectivity and all of the groups, different types of posts, things that have been shared, reshared, shared again, all of the different types of comments that people leave in different formats is all well and good. But if I'm looking for just a quick snapshot, I want a pretty picture to look at while I've got 10 seconds left of my lunch. I think Instagram fills that niche really nicely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing, actually, later on in the show, we also cover a local musician, and in this podcast we're going to be covering Hounding from Canterbury, so stay tuned later in the podcast for that. But back to Dan and Facebook and Instagram.
But then I'm quite conscious of this sort of dissonance that comes up where what people put forward on social media tends to be the highlight reel. It tends to be the parts that they really particularly want you to see, whether it's because they're just so happy or because they're showing off or they're proud of what's going on at the time, they're really enjoying themselves, which is great, but that might be a small percentage of your life. You know, you don't get engaged every day, you don't go rock climbing in Chile every day, you don't see a beautiful sunset out by the beach every day. And I'm quite aware of this sort of cognitive dissonance that goes on between what Facebook is trying to show me with the most liked and the most influential posts and what I think that person's life is like. And I feel like there's a giant disconnect between the lives that people put forward on social media and the lives that they lead.
Yeah, and so regarding why you post to social media once or twice a week, what kind of posting do you do and why would you say you do it? As you said, you think people post the big events.
At the moment, there's not a lot of big events going on in my life, so I don't put many of those up. I will tend to put up stuff for, I would like to go on walks in the countryside with my girlfriend, so we'll tend to put a few bits up. Actually, we'll tend to take pictures together. I'll send my pictures to her and she'll make a post. And it's just part of showing off like the beautiful scenery, because I think a certain part of using social media is the expectation to keep using it. And I feel like some people can interpret silence really strongly as reclusiveness or not wanting to be a part of the social norm. So
you feel that you've got a bit of, would you call it a pressure or just how it is to post to social media frequently, to post at least once or twice a week, and you feel maybe that by not posting it would be affecting the people around you?
I feel like there's not a tremendous amount of pressure coming from the people themselves. No. But when you're presented with this constant highlight reel of interesting things, whether it's a nice plate of food or a nice view from a window or a walk out in the countryside, like I said, there's a certain pressure to be a part of that and demonstrate that you're enjoying your life as much as everybody else is.
Regarding actually stepping away, has there ever been a point recently where you have stepped away from social media?
There was an example, actually. I had an enormous breakup about 2 years ago. And I completely disconnected from Facebook, Instagram, and everything else I was using at the time. And it was just a part of stepping away from the entire life that I knew and sort of forging a new one and forging new friendships, meeting new people, going to new places. And although I took a lot of pictures and made a lot of memories during those times, very little of it actually made it onto any social media platform. I had a slightly spooky experience when I was a younger man, where my boss at the time told me that the first thing they do with any CV they get when they're hiring for a new candidate is look them up on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh God, how did I ever get hired?
Yeah.
And it was an eye-opening moment for me, and I started to realise some of the risk that comes with putting a less carefully manicured version of your life out there.
So you think that this is something that maybe should be educated more, the idea of making, especially young people now, secondary school age, letting them know what the impact of posting to social media can lead to down the road?
I think it happens quite naturally even before they get to the stage of looking for jobs and bits like that. You know, at the age that people are making social media accounts, you know, when they're sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, that sort of age, then it is, you know, they're going to get to job-seeking age well after the point at which they find their older content more embarrassing. Where social media is now evolving into this middle age where middle-aged people in particular have maybe 10 years of content on one social media platform. There's just too much of it for them to prune sometimes.
Yeah, you see sometimes footballers who have tweeted from when they were a kid and obviously never expecting the success of becoming a Premier League level footballer, and then having tweets come back to haunt you many years later because someone's captured it, even if it is deleted.
The internet gives you an anonymous face, and when you're yelling into the void and just putting stuff out there on Twitter and just, you know, you put a hashtag on it and you let your opinion fly, you don't ever expect there to be any sort of retaliation, or nobody will know who it's from, it's like that. You're just a username in the crowd, which is all well and good, but then suddenly you get, you know, maybe a high-profile job, or maybe a boss looks you up or something like that, and all of a sudden you stop being anonymous, and everything you've ever said anonymously has your name on it. Because if the person knows your username, the anonymity is lost. And all of a sudden, the things that you posted thinking nobody was going to pay attention to are suddenly the subject of a lot of scrutiny, and it can be very harmful. It was actually a big change. I'm sure you were a YouTube user at the time they switched from usernames to real names. Did you notice a change in the tone of comments then? Because your comments went from being just a username to being your full name.
Yeah.
And the comments all of a sudden became a lot less toxic, because instead of being, you know, Mr. Mystery 69 on YouTube posting horrible things to, you know, everyone that they watched the videos from, all of a sudden it was, you know, Mike Smith from down the road. And thought, oh God, what have I done? Thought Mike Smith as he logged into his YouTube video and found that he had no likes on his comments anymore.
So socially stepping back from that world is a beneficial thing, I think, and actually get some headspace. It's quite nice. You use the phrase shouting into the void, which is quite a nice one, because it just describes the endless amount of content that's out there that, would you agree, could be quite overwhelming if you don't have time to step back?
Oh, certainly. I think Instagram in particular is guilty of that, because you have to search on Instagram for what you want.
Yeah.
And if it was the other way round, the amount of content pushed towards you would just be enormous. You know, you have to filter it. I want to look at hashtag Canterbury, hashtag Christchurch, hashtag, you know, student, hashtag whatever. If you don't, you're only showing your friends' posts. And again, you get the Facebook effect if they're showing you the best picture of their lives. But the amount of content that you can find related to any topic is too enormous for you to look at everything you want. There's going to be a continuous feed of new stuff if you look at half of what you want to look at. There's such an enormous amount of content out there that it can be overwhelming, I think, for people that are new to social media, again, the younger people, and trying to put forth a valuable contribution into a pile of contributions as high as it is is quite challenging. I think this is why people reach for the real high ebbs of their lives to you know, memorialise. Yeah,
which is why I think some people actually end up taking that step away, because you see how perfect some other lives appear, and that can often, I've seen it lead to some forms of anxieties or frustrations, because you are then looking at your own life and not actually seeing it for as good as it is, because you see everyone else's life being so much better than yours, even though obviously, as you said, it's not. It's that best show reel. I like the idea of a highlight reel, and it's not the emotion of the situation itself, I guess, because you're just posting the moment.
Very much so. I think there's a certain amount of fear of missing out, because you look at your Facebook feed at the moment. Now, it's a warm time of year right now, And holidays in Europe are starting to become really attractive at this time of year because the weather's so good. And so my Facebook feed is filled with people on little getaways and little holidays. And there's a certain amount of fear of missing out because I don't have any plans to go away in the immediate future. But it feels like everyone around me is because I've seen 6 holidays on Facebook. And it seems like that's the whole world all of a sudden. Everyone's on holiday but me. What the hell? Why aren't I on holiday? What it doesn't show you is that, the 6 months of scrimping and scraping that couple has gone through to go for that, romantic getaway in Venice or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not showing you the amount of work that goes into achieving those rewards. And that's why I think it can be very valuable to step away from social media for short periods so that you can sort of see your life without the context of these other wonderful things happening around it all the time. You can, appreciate what's going on in your life without having wonderful moments from everybody else's life sort of shoved at you.
And I know I certainly feel, and you might feel the same, when you just want to step back and you want to look at your own life, you are getting quite a lot of opinions and quite a lot of what everyone else is doing. So would you recommend, you recommended that people should take a step back as well. I'm of the same opinion that just to at least get a taste of what life is like without social media is good for a person, because then you can actually judge which side you prefer. Maybe you actually enjoyed being outside of it, but what would you recommend people do to socially detox? Would you just recommend an hour a day, or would you recommend they go away for a week like I did and actually not have internet on the whole time?
I'd recommend that people use social media as much as they feel comfortable for most of the time, but during the real highlights, the real moments that you're going to look back and remember on. Like I remember climbing Mount Snowdon in the rain. When I took a break from social media, it allowed me to sort of look at my life very objectively and without the context of other people's social media output affecting what I think my life should be. I was able to enjoy the things that I enjoyed a lot more because there was no guilt. There was no fear of missing out of like, oh, maybe instead of doing this, I should be doing what other people are doing, or I should be living my life to their standards, or, going on these wonderful holidays. Travel is one of the major ones. People put forwards travelling quite a lot, and if you're not travelling, again, you feel like you're missing out. But just because somebody else's life is very happy, it doesn't mean your life has to be sad. And I think that stepping away from social media reminds you of that.
Yeah, and travel is a big one, I know, because is it because you're exploring a new place and you just feel like you need to get everyone else into feeling what it was like to be in the place?
In equal measure, it makes the audience feel left out because the audience wants to be there.
Yeah.
But if the audience, if all they see is posts where they want to be there, then all they do is want. If they're not living their own highlight reel, as it were, all they're seeing is these wonderful moments that they're not having.
So on both sides of the coin, good side, it's positive because it might push you. You see someone in a place that you want to be. You might see that photo of that place and go, hey, I want to be where they are right now. Their photo is what has encouraged me to go to this place. I'm now going to put in the work to get there. On the other hand, if someone, maybe they're struggling financially, maybe they don't have the time to put money aside for this kind of event, and they see this kind of post, it's obviously going to have the very opposite opinion. So we're probably, would you agree, living in quite a grey area of social media with how people react to things?
I think if you're sharing knowledge and sharing information, the reaction will tend to be quite positive, because one of the reasons I like looking up hashtag Canterbury on Instagram is that I've lived in and around this area for a very long time. But on that hashtag on Instagram, I still see all these wonderful new little places. I see the constant swapping of small shops. There's always new coffee shops popping up, new bookshops, stuff that I'd miss out on if I wasn't looking at that on social media.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually also look up hashtag Canterbury for the exact same reasons.
Absolutely, because we've all seen those posts of Westgate Gardens and we all think that's beautiful, and we're all like, what time shall we go there to get the best pictures? It's a wonderful way of sharing information about people, places and things.
Yeah, because I guess people also want a little bit of rawness in social media, and that's where part of my passion for audio came from. was seeing and hearing people's stories online where in the context of a podcast, you get the context from them and you get to learn a little bit more about them deeply because you're having time to sit down and chat with them. So, talking about social media and the ones you mentioned, Facebook and Instagram, I want to take a turn because, Dan, I met you through a social media app called Meetup.
True.
Which I would like us to mention, and I find it very interesting that the social media app we actually met on hasn't been mentioned yet in the podcast, and I'd like to talk about Meetup. So for those of you who don't know, Meetup is a social media app where the whole point of the app is not using it. You go on, you find events in your local area. There's 2 groups for Canterbury, and you can go there to meet new people, interact, and then you start to build real friendships in real places that you've met. And so how do you think, Dan, this social media outlet compares to something like Instagram?
I don't think it does. I mean, Meetup is designed around a platform where you can barely post anything to it at all. You can't put, it's not geared around having a profile. You have your own picture, name, age if you want, and a list of interests, and that's it. But the way it works is, as you've described very well, you form groups, and then as a member of that group, you'll be invited to meetups, which are meetings of that group in a particular place to do a certain activity. Some of them are social, some of them are religious. There's stuff like book clubs, exercise meetups, anything you want, you can find it on there. Big up the Canterbury, Dover and Folkestone 20s and 30s groups, of which we are regular attendees.
Oh, yes.
And it's a platform for finding new people and making new friends, and you can use it as much or as little as you want. What you can't do is post much in the way of pictures, which really stops a lot of this fear of missing out, because you can see the events listed on the app, you can see past, present and future events, and you can say to yourself, no, I don't want to go to this one, I don't feel like it, I'm not up to it, whatever the reason may be, but you can see the next one out in the future. You can add it to your calendar, and away you go. I don't think there's much in the way of pushing forwards a certain standard of living or a certain hobby or a certain range of activities that other people are doing that perhaps you might feel you want to incorporate into your life.
So do you think maybe that this is the direction social media should move in, this idea of actually using social media to meet people? So I know that guests for this podcast and musicians, in fact the musician we're featuring today, Hounding, I met them because I was posting in forums, looking for musicians, looking for people to come onto the podcast in the local area, and I was able to find and get in touch and get to know them. Similar with you through Meetup, and that was actually a feature I used on Facebook to find forums. Do you think that this direction is where social media should go, or do you think there should be a balance of picture posting as well?
I think that the big 3 at the moment is Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And they do a fairly good job at separating down into their little niches. And I feel like if you're looking for buy and sell groups and residence groups and looking at family reunion pictures and bits like that, following everyone that on Facebook is for you. And I think people understand that. And I think that you don't necessarily have exactly the same set of friends and followers on Instagram, because the content that Instagram gears itself towards is quite different. It's a bit more disposable, it's a bit quick, it's a bit more self-centric, and it's the perfect platform for that. You can't do much but post a picture, put your hashtags on it, tag your people in it, tag friends in comments, that's about it. Facebook is this enormous slow-moving behemoth that you can put a huge amount of detail and complexity into, but it sort of specialises in this really wide-reaching, growing personal networks out of your friends. Yeah. And I feel like people come to expect that from those platforms in particular, and I think that it will lead them to go further in those directions. I don't think there's going to be much change in sort of cross functionality. I think Twitter is always going to be very much like Twitter. Facebook is always going to be very much like Facebook. Instagram has some flexibility. It could go one way or the other. Snapchat is always going to be quick and disposable because that's its gimmick, that's its unique selling point. These are what we have come to respect the platforms for. Yeah. And we see, these these companies can lose huge amounts of members if they do things that the general public doesn't like. Snapchat lost an enormous amount of users during the infamous redesign of the app a few years ago at this point, because it didn't match with what people wanted from the app or what they expected from it.
And so do you think maybe with social media, the changes that are going to come, aren't the actual apps changing, so Facebook and Instagram, even YouTube now and Snapchat, but the inclusion of new ones? So we've mentioned Meetup. Do you think a positive change would be for something like Meetup to rise, but with another falling? You have to remember MySpace was all the rage at one point, and it didn't adapt to what people wanted, so it fell. Do you think people are consciously choosing not to use apps like Meetup, but to use apps like Instagram? Or do you think that because they don't know Meetup exists, they're not using it?
I think that people will tend to find the platform that works best for them. I mean, Facebook is already dead amongst young people. That's life now. You know, a lot of people aged 14 to 22 don't have Facebook profiles because they're just not relevant to them anymore. Me and you met through Meetup, as you said. I found Meetup because I Google searched app for meeting new people.
Yeah.
Because Facebook is all well and good, but it introduces you to people that you already know. And I wanted the opposite of that. I wanted something that was going to introduce me to people that I could, you know, go and find and actually meet for the first time after getting in touch with them on the app. So Meetup filled that niche, but I had to go looking for that niche. Now, Facebook didn't provide it. Instagram didn't provide it. I found that, you know, I needed a different type of social media in my life, and I had to go and find it.
Yeah. So do you think this is something that other people besides yourself also need, that they're just struggling to find? Again, I stumbled across the app. I think my parents mentioned it to me. And so I didn't even find it myself, but I knew I needed to look for it. I just wasn't. And I know that at that point in my life, my social circle was much, much smaller. And I wasn't looking for it, even though I knew I needed it. And so you took the proactive step. Do you think that there's more effort we all can maybe make to help people who want to be in that situation?
I think the best that we can do at this point is to encourage them to find solutions to their problem, because technology is far more accessible than it has ever been. It's easier to produce an app now than it's ever been. And if you can think of a problem, then for the most part, a solution is already going to exist. You know, we met through Meetup because we had a similar problem, which was we wanted a bigger social circle. LinkedIn is another example of a lesser mentioned social media platform that a huge amount of people use. And that was there to focus on people's careers. And, you know, people find themselves in situations where they want a better job, they want to appeal to a wider professional audience. And the, you know, social media applications that they have already don't fill that niche. Yeah. So they go and find a new one.
Well, yeah, it's the different reasons you want to connect to people. So for LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn's the direct middle between Facebook and Meetup. So in Meetup, I definitely went to try and form more complex friendships. Facebook and Instagram, I don't feel like you can make the same level of friendship as you can with an app like Meetup, where you're spending a lot of time sitting with them, especially at quite a socially oriented meetup, which is a Friday night, you're going out and you're just talking.
Yeah.
Whereas Facebook, I don't feel like you can make quite as personal relationships with. You can, and I've actually got an example to bring up later, but LinkedIn kind of sits in the middle where you're doing it professionally, so you're planning to probably meet these people and have a professional relationship, so it will probably lead to real work, but you're keeping it on quite a formal level, but you're not there to just have conversations with people that you'll never meet.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Meetup is kind of an outsider, where the point of Meetup is to spend as little time on the app and as much time meeting people in person as possible. And I think, as far as I know, that's fairly unique, obviously with the exception of dating apps and the like.
Yeah.
It's quite rare that you have a platform that pushes you towards making friends IRL.
Yeah, yeah. And I think on Instagram, as we've talked about regarding niches, I've been able to make a couple of close friendships on Instagram because we do the same type of photography. I do Lego photography on Instagram, made some friends through that. And when I was just doing landscape and portrait photography, made other friends through that, some of which I still stay in touch with now. And obviously I only made a handful of friends through Instagram. Meetup, completely different animal. I was trying to use Instagram really to achieve Meetup levels of results.
Oh, you can use it for whatever you want to use it for, and there's no right or wrong answers. But you'll always get best results using a social media platform for the most part for what it's tailored for. Yeah. There are very few exceptions. There are exceptions out there.
So lastly, regarding social media detoxing, would you include it in a detox? Do you think that the app is something to detox Meetup in the same way that you would detox Facebook and Instagram?
I think it's quite different. I mean, I've actually used Meetup in the middle of a social media detox halfway up a mountain.
And you didn't include that as a social media?
No, not at all, because in opening the app, looking through a list of future events, and picking ones that I'd like to join and ones that I'd like to go to, I didn't actually interact with anyone else. All I did really was put my name on a list somewhere.
And you look forward to that thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah, you're just excited to go to that next event.
100%.
And so in a way, we need to really figure out what the definition of social media is as a world, really, because we're including it as social media.
Sure.
But yeah, you said, and you know what? When I was away for my social media detox, I checked the app as well, Meetup.
Absolutely.
And it was the only thing I actually looked at for the whole time that I was away. It's interesting that we don't include it in that.
It's interesting that we've drawn the same parallel with it not being the same type of social media platform.
And do you think, because obviously Meetup's something that's trying to take you away from the app, that obviously a lot of other social medias, they do quite a lot to try and keep you in the app. So Facebook, actually especially Instagram, is about being self-contained. So you don't need to app hop to go anywhere else. And that leads to people spending quite a lot of time on their phones. Do you think people spend too much time on their phones nowadays? And how that's changed over the last 10 years?
Yes, but I don't think it's their fault. I think that the apps have now been designed to produce much longer application use times than they have ever been in the past. There's a huge amount of A/B testing going on at the moment across a huge amount of analytics companies to produce longer watch times. And the biggest thing that they ever introduced was, they all did it around the same time, I'm sure you will have noticed. Instead of having a sequential list of posts that go in date order from everyone, they will pick what they think are the most influential posts that you haven't seen and show them to you. Then when you go to refresh your Facebook timeline, your Twitter feed, your Instagram feed, whatever, they will show you the next batch of, second most influential posts for you. And they won't be in date sequential order either. They could be from a few seconds ago or from a few weeks ago. And instead of giving you this timeline for you to look through, they now give you a list of posts which are designed to produce the longest viewing time. This is most obvious on Twitter, because when they twitched from a sequential timeline to a feed-based timeline, it was immediately obvious that you couldn't just jump into conversations anymore. You were seeing conversations that were a few days old, which in Twitter time is thousands of years, that were no longer relevant, but Twitter thought they might be interesting to you, so you were showing them anyway, and it deadened the pace of a lot of Twitter conversations because it wasn't as easy to jump in, jump out. They had to reintroduce a whole new method of hashtagging to make that work again. YouTube in particular is well known for this because your default page used to be your subscribers page. That is completely dead and buried now. That you can still get to your subscribers page. Yeah. It's not even on the first, it's not even something you see when you go to youtube.com. Now you see your feed, which is not a timeline. It's what YouTube thinks you might be interested in, which is all well and good, but that doesn't even include necessarily any of your subscriptions or any of your most watched videos or anything like that.
Well, you have subscriptions on the side, but it's not the primary view.
Absolutely. YouTube will show you whatever it thinks you'll engage with. It will tend to favour things on your subscriptions, but if you notice you clear your viewing history and then look at your YouTube feed, only 10 or 15% of it is actually from your subscriptions. Most of it comes from what YouTube believe is your most engaging posts, your most engaging videos. This behaviour and this analytical approach to getting people to spend more time in the app is repeated across almost all social media platforms because they're trying to get you to look through all of your posts, engage with them all, leave a comment, leave a reaction, leave a whatever, make it very easy for you to just do a one-tap emoji reaction instead of having to think of a comment, for example.
Yeah.
Once that's done, they want you to go back to the top,
Start
pull
again.
the screen down, get a refresh, and you'll notice it doesn't even move the old posts down. It wipes them, and you get a whole new list of posts. Because it's like a whole new trap for your brain to fall into. It's a whole new list of wonderful, engaging new things. And oh no, wouldn't it be terrible if you did miss out on one? Because here and there are hidden gems. Like, oh look, here's a holiday picture that I should really, put a heart emoji on or something like that. They're designed to be as engaging as possible, and it can be very difficult, if you're very susceptible to it, to pull away from that.
The type of posts they're now getting, in a way, I guess, because it's so focused, aren't actually there to benefit or educate. I mean, primarily entertain, but you're not really being informed about it a whole lot. Although I have heard that some people just use social media, especially Facebook, as their primary source of news.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very easy to surround yourself with like-minded opinions on platforms as big as Facebook. And in such environments, you will always come across things that you agree with.
Yeah.
And news is included in that, like any other media. And you can put yourself in an echo chamber of news that you completely love and agree with because it's exactly in line with what you think.
So you don't see the other side because you just get the views you're associated with.
And you don't see a balanced argument. And you can become quite vitriolic almost entirely by accident because you think that things are happening that have been perhaps twisted out of view and you don't necessarily have a balanced argument.
Yeah, so you see an entire side of a viewpoint and you can't even imagine what it's like being on the other side because you've only seen your own situation. So, and yeah, as you said at the start, you think it's not people's fault, but there's good and bad to it.
Yeah, certainly. It's a good way of keeping up to date with what you want to keep up to date with. And as long as what you want to keep up to date with is healthy, then there's no issue. But if you're being presented with unrealistic expectations for, again, beauty standards or the amount you travel, what you should be doing with your life, the type of job you should have, the type of car you should drive, then perhaps that can become damaging.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. That was Dan, and he was talking about social media detoxing. But do you have a story to tell about this subject? If so, feel free to leave us a comment on YouTube or actually contact us on the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast, and we'll probably be featuring some of the comments over the next few episodes, so get your thoughts to us. Interestingly, obviously, using social media to get people's opinions.
Please use all of your potentially dangerous social media platforms to contact us as much as possible.
Yep. Just
spread the word.
Yeah. Next, because this is actually quite a local podcast, Kent, I was just wondering, Dan, if you could briefly sum up the impact locally, and if there's anything done locally or anything you could do locally or recommend locally to improve it within the area of Kent. So a majority of our listeners are Kent-based. If there's anything social detoxing-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Kent is a beautiful county in the summer, and the summer's coming. Get outside, go for some walks, go to Dover Castle. It's beautiful. Go to Leeds Castle. You can be there all day. Get outside, leave the social media behind for just a little bit and see how much you enjoy it. It'll be a wonderful day.
Yeah, because it obviously depends completely how much experience you put into being away from social media, and then you can judge for yourself how much you want to or to not use it. So next, we're just going to briefly talk about future episodes of the podcast and stories that we might be able to get you on as a guest. So a couple of future topics that we're going to be discussing, and if you feel like you can come on and talk about these, again, feel free to contact the Facebook page. We're going to be talking about being materialistic. I'm a collector, and I want to know if you have any stories about being a collector or collecting, and whether you think that this is trapping or freeing for a person. We're also going to be talking about the power of music. I have songs that connect me to memories. Do you have a story about a piece of music and how it's changed your life? And also other things. So I thought I didn't like the idea of travelling on my own, but when I did, I loved it. So do you have a moment when you travelled alone, and how did it go? Solo travelling, we'd like to know about. If you can help with any of these points, again, contact us at the My Generation Podcast on Facebook, or using all the links in the description of this podcast here on YouTube. On today's show, we will be featuring local artist Hounding, a three-piece grunge band from Canterbury. They are a loud rock band with a bit of hybrid going on, and you can find them on Facebook and Instagram at Hounding Band, and on Spotify as well, which will be linked in the description of this YouTube video. Here is Hounding with their song titled Anxiety.
wishing for a perfect world where I don't have to see your face and I don't have to be myself. Well, keep on fishing the virtual lights, because your personality isn't right. Anxiety gets the best of me. Anxiety is killing me. It's killing me. I'm feeling sorry for myself. My slowly fading mental health. Well, I've been thinking I hate myself. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Anxiety gets the best of me. Anxiety is killing me. Go!
And that was Hounding from Canterbury with their great song, Anxiety. So to wrap up this week's episode of the My Generation podcast on social media detoxing, Dan, how would you like to conclude this week's episode?
I have a short-ish quote from Emily Maruchon, which is about on feeling behind in life. And if you've ever felt anxious, which I'm lucky enough to not suffer from this so much, but if you've ever felt anxious about what you see in the social media, think about the following. You're not behind in life. There's no schedule or timetable that we all must follow. It's all made up. Wherever you are right now is exactly where you need to be. 7 billion people can't do everything in exactly the same scheduled order. We are all different with a variety of needs and goals. Some get married early, some get married late, while others don't get married at all. What is early? What is late? Compared with whom? Compared with what? Some want children, others don't. Some want a career, others enjoy taking care of a house and children. Your life is not on anyone else's schedule. Don't beat yourself up for where you are right now. It's your timeline, not anyone else's, and nothing is off schedule.
And that is a beautiful quote to end the episode. Thank you for that, Dan. Thank you for bringing that quote to us.
And the crowd goes mild.
And that concludes this week's episode of the My Generation podcast. Thank you for coming on, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me.
And you can find this episode now on YouTube, and we will be keeping the Facebook page and YouTube updated for following episodes of the podcast.
Audience, I'm trying to open my water really quietly. Wait. Got it. Smashed it. Sorry.
That bit is making it in.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Dan. We'll definitely be having Dan on the show as a guest again. Would you like to come back, Dan?
Oh, please. I'll come back for every episode.
Thank you, Dan.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so thank you for that, everyone. Thank you for listening along. Do please leave your thoughts in the comments below about what we've been talking about today. Me and Dan would love to hear them. And I will see you on the next episode of the My Generation podcast.
I'm always wishing for a perfect world where I don't have to see your face and I don't have to be myself. Well, keep on fishing the virtual lights, because your personality isn't right. Anxiety gets the best of me. Anxiety is killing me. It's killing me. I'm feeling sorry for myself. My slowly fading